Claire sat in that fancy restaurant, listening to her husband tell his friends that their marriage was a joke. He laughed, looked at her with disdain, and told her she wasn't even close to his level. Everyone laughed. At that moment, something inside Claire snapped, but not in the way he expected. She smiled, got up from the table, and said the words that changed her life forever. And that very night, a message arrived on her cell phone. An entire life can crumble in just a few seconds. For Claire, it was precisely those seconds that transformed humiliation into freedom, pain into power, and contempt into determination. That night in a fancy restaurant wasn't the end of her marriage. It was the beginning of something much bigger. While Richard laughed with his friends, mocking her in front of everyone, Claire made the bravest decision of her life. She didn't beg, she didn't cry, she didn't try to explain herself. She simply got up and left. But the story didn't end there. In fact, it had barely begun. What happened after that night changed everything. An unexpected message, an offer impossible to refuse, and a journey that transformed Claire into someone she never imagined she could become. Before we continue, tell us in the comments, which city and country are you watching from? Claire glanced at the car mirror and adjusted her red lipstick. This night was special, or at least that's what Richard had said. An important dinner with his business partners at the most expensive restaurant in town. She had chosen the navy blue dress he liked, which made her look both elegant and understated. Understated. That word had become a part of her life in recent years. "Are you ready?" Richard asked, looking at the expensive watch on his wrist. He didn't look at her. No compliment, no smile. Just hurry. "I am," Claire replied, picking up the small bag. The restaurant was exactly as she'd imagined. Low lights, crisp white tablecloths, waiters who moved like silent shadows. The kind of place where people spoke softly and measured every word. Richard led the way, and Claire followed behind him, as she always did. The table was in the center of the room. 5 men were already seated, all in dark suits, all with that air of superiority Claire knew so well. Their wives were there too, with polite smiles and idle conversation. Richard greeted each of them with firm handshakes and loud laughter. Claire stood there, waiting to be introduced. But that didn't happen. "Richard, you're finally here," one of the men said, raising his wine glass. "But we thought you'd forgotten about us." "Never," Richard replied, sitting in the main chair. Claire waited a second, 2, 3. No one pulled out a chair for her. No one even glanced in her direction. She sat alone, next to Richard, and placed her bag on her lap. Conversations began. Business deals, investments, numbers. Claire didn't fully understand. She tried to pay attention, but it was as if she were invisible. The other women at the table chatted among themselves about stores, beauty treatments, travel. Claire smiled politely when one of them spoke to her, but the conversation quickly died down. "Claire doesn't understand much about these things," Richard said suddenly, interrupting her silence. Everyone looked at her. "She's more of a domestic type. She prefers to stay home." Claire felt her face heat up. Maid. The word sounded like an insult in his mouth. She opened her mouth to respond, but closed it again. What would she say? That she'd given up her career to support his. That she'd given up her dreams to take care of their home, their responsibilities, their lives? "Oh, that's sweet," one of the women said, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We should all be more simple like that." Simple. Another word that hurt. Dinner continued. Claire ate in silence, chewing slowly, trying to look busy. Richard was beaming, telling stories about his business, about how he'd closed an incredible deal last week. He gestured with his hands, laughed loudly, and dominated the entire table. And Claire? Claire was just the woman sitting next to him. "You know how it is," Richard said, looking at his friends. "Marriage is work. Sometimes you wonder why you're still there." The men laughed. Claire stopped chewing. "I understand you perfectly," one of them replied. "Well, my wife is always complaining that I work too much. But someone has to pay the bills, right?" More laughter. Claire took a sip of water. Her throat was dry. Claire is patient, Richard continued, as if she weren't there. She puts up with a lot, but sometimes I wonder how long this will last. Silence. Everyone at the table looked at Claire. She felt her heart beat faster. Richard was doing this in front of everyone. He was belittling her, humiliating her, as if it were a joke. "What do you mean by that?" Claire asked, her voice coming out firmer than she expected. Richard shrugged. "I'm just being realistic. Our marriage isn't exactly a fairy tale, is it?" Claire looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time in years, she saw who Richard really was. Not the man she had married. Not the man who promised to love her forever. But a man who saw her as less than. As disposable as nothing. "You're saying that here, in front of everyone?" Claire asked. "Claire, don't make a scene," Richard said quietly but firmly. "You're being dramatic. Dramatic. One more word for the collection." Claire placed her napkin on the table. She looked around. All eyes were on her, waiting to see what she would do. Waiting to see if she would accept, bow, disappear. But something inside her shifted. Something broke, but not in the way they expected. She took a deep breath. And then, for the first time that night, Claire smiled. A small smile, but genuine. Because in that moment, she understood. She didn't need this anymore. She didn't need him anymore. But what Claire didn't know yet was that that decision, made there in that fancy restaurant, would change everything. And that in a few hours, a message would arrive on her cell phone. A message that would open doors she didn't even know existed. If you were in Claire's shoes at that moment, what would you do? Would you remain silent or take action? Let us know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories like this. Claire was still processing what Richard had just said when he began speaking again. Only this time, his voice was louder, more confident, as if he were presenting something to an audience. And maybe he was. "You know what's funny?" Richard said, looking at his friends around the table. "People think marriage is about love, companionship, all that stuff. But it's not. It's about compatibility, and sometimes you realize too late that you chose the wrong person." Claire felt her blood run cold. He wasn't doing this. Not here. Not in front of all those people. "Richard," she began, but he held up his hand, cutting her off. "Let me finish," he said, not looking at her. He was looking at the other men at the table, as if Claire wasn't even there. "I built everything I have from scratch. I worked days and nights, sacrificing time, health, everything. And when you're at that level, you need someone who understands that. Someone who's on the same level as you." One of the men nodded. "That makes perfect sense, Richard. You need a partner who adds value." "Exactly," Richard agreed, picking up his wine glass and taking a long sip. "But sometimes you get married young, immature, without thinking things through. And then you wake up 10 years later and realize you're stuck in something that no longer makes sense." Claire felt her hands tremble. She clenched her fingers against the bag in her lap, trying to maintain her composure. Everyone at the table was looking at Richard, hanging on his every word. He was loving it. The attention, the control, the power. It was like he was giving a business presentation, except the product he was selling was the idea that Claire was worthless. "Are you talking about your wedding?" one of the partners asked, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Richard shrugged, feigning casualness, but Claire saw the intention behind his every move. "I'm speaking from the truth. Look, Claire is a good person. She takes care of the house, does things right, but that's all. She has no ambition, no vision. She's comfortable with mediocrity." The word cut Claire like a knife. Mediocrity. He was calling her mediocre. In front of everyone. As if all the years she'd spent supporting him, making sacrifices for him, giving up her dreams for him, meant nothing. "Richard, stop," Claire said, her voice low but firm. He finally looked at her, and his gaze was empty, cold, as if she were a stranger. "Claire, you know it's true. You've never wanted anything more than a simple life, and that's okay. But I'm not simple. I don't settle for less. One of the women at the table coughed, clearly uncomfortable, but no one said anything. No one defended Claire. They just stood there, watching the show, as if it were entertainment. You know what I said to Nathan the other day? Richard continued, pointing to his best partner, a gray-haired man sitting across the table. Nathan avoided Claire's gaze, diverting his gaze to the plate in front of him. I said I doubt this marriage will survive another year. I bet it won't even come close. She's just not in my league. The men laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was a laugh of mockery, of agreement, as if it were obvious that Claire wasn't enough, as if it were obvious that she would never be, as if everything she had done, everything she had been, was invisible. Claire felt something break inside her. It wasn't anger, it wasn't sadness, it was clarity, absolute, crystal clear clarity. She had spent years trying to be what Richard wanted, trying to fit into his world, trying to be less so he could be more. And now, here he was, laughing at her, humiliating her, tearing her down in front of strangers. And she realized that no matter how hard she tried, it would never be enough for him. Because the problem was never her. It was him. You're right, Claire said suddenly. Her voice was calm, steady, almost surprising herself. Richard stopped talking. Everyone at the table looked at her. What? Richard asked, frowning. You're right, Claire repeated, looking him straight in the eye. This marriage won't survive another year. Richard laughed, thinking she was agreeing with him. See, even she admits it. You won't survive another year because you won't survive another hour, Claire continued. She got up from her chair, grabbing her bag. Why wait a year, Richard? Let's finish this today. The silence at the table was deafening. Everyone stopped breathing. Richard stood frozen, his wineglass still in his hand, his mouth open, his eyes wide. Claire, sit down, he said, his voice low, almost threatening. You're making a scene. No, Richard. You did the scene. I'm just finishing it. Claire shouldered her bag and looked around the table. It was nice meeting you all. Good night. She began walking. Each step felt lighter than the last, as if a giant weight were being lifted from her shoulders. She heard Richard calling her name, his voice rising in pitch, but she didn't look back. Not this time. Never again. Claire walked through the restaurant, past the tables, the waiters, the dim lights, and when she pushed open the door and stepped out onto the street, the cool night air hit her face like a hug. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, Claire felt free. But what she didn't know was that night was just beginning, and that in a few hours her phone would ring. A message from Nathan, Richard's best partner. And that message would change everything. Claire walked down the sidewalk, her heels clicking steadily against the concrete. The cool night wind blew against her face, but she didn't feel cold. She felt something different, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Power, control over her own life, freedom. She stopped at the corner and looked back. The restaurant was still there, its warm, golden lights shining through the windows. She imagined Richard still sitting at that table, trying to explain to his friends what had just happened, trying to regain control of the situation, trying to appear as if he were still in charge. But Claire knew the truth. She had taken away his power. With one simple sentence, she had turned the tide. A taxi drove by, and Claire raised her hand. The car stopped in front of her, and she got in the back seat, giving her home address. As the taxi drove through the bright city streets, Claire rested her head against the cool glass of the window and closed her eyes. 10 years. She had spent 10 years of her life with Richard. 10 years believing he loved her. 10 years trying to be enough. When she met Richard, he was different, or at least he seemed so. He was charming, attentive, full of dreams. He talked about building a future together, about being partners in everything. And Claire believed him. She gave up her promising career in marketing to support his business. She left her friends, her hobbies, her dreams, everything to be by his side. But little by little, Richard changed. Or maybe he'd always been that way, and Claire just didn't want to see it. His meetings became more important than their dinners. His business became more important than their marriage. And Claire became invisible. The taxi stopped in front of the house. A large, beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood. The dream house, Richard always said. But for Claire, that house was never a home. It was just a place where she slept, where she waited for Richard to return late at night, where she pretended everything was fine. Claire paid the driver and got out of the car. She opened the front door and walked inside. The house was silent, a heavy, suffocating silence. She kicked off her shoes and walked into the living room, turning on the lights. Everything was in place. Everything was perfect, as always. She sat on the couch and looked around. How many times had she cleaned this house? How many times had she organized the objects, rearranged the furniture, tried to make everything look nice for Richard? And he didn't even notice. He just walked in, tossed his briefcase on the counter, and went to his office to work. Claire reached into her purse for her phone. No messages, no calls. Richard hadn't tried to contact her yet, and that, in some strange way, didn't surprise her. He was probably still at the restaurant, drinking wine, laughing, pretending nothing had happened. Because for him, nothing important had happened. Claire leaving wasn't a problem. It was almost expected. She got up and went to the bedroom. Their bedroom, or what used to be theirs. Claire opened the closet and looked at Richard's clothes hung neatly. Expensive suits, starched shirts, silk ties, everything organized by color. She had done this. She had taken care of every detail of his life while he built his empire. And what had she built? Nothing. She had become his shadow. The perfect wife who stayed home, who didn't bother, who asked for nothing, who disappeared. Claire closed the closet and sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at her hands. Hands that had once held dreams. Hands that had once created marketing campaigns that made people stop and take notice. Hands that had talent, skill, vision. But now all they knew was cleaning, organizing, and obeying. Not anymore, Claire thought. Not anymore. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Claire took it out and looked at the screen. It was a message, from a number she knew. Nathan, Richard's business partner. The man who had sat silently at the table while Richard humiliated her. Claire hesitated. Why was Nathan texting her? She opened it. Claire, we need to talk. What happened today was unacceptable. Richard was wrong. Completely wrong. And I have something I need to tell you. Something important. Can you call me when you have a moment? Claire read the message twice, 3 times. Nathan was contacting her. Richard's best partner. The man who knew all his business secrets. What did he want? Why was he talking to her? She typed a quick reply. I'm home. You can call me now. Less than 10 seconds later, the phone rang. Claire answered. Claire! Nathan's voice was serious, but gentle. Thank you for answering. I know you must be processing a lot right now, but I couldn't stay silent. What Richard did today was horrible. And I want you to know that I don't agree with anything he said. Claire took a deep breath. Nathan, why are you calling me? Because I have a proposal for you, Nathan said. A proposal that could change everything. Claire felt her heart race. What kind of proposal? A business proposal. Claire, I know who you were before you married Richard. I know the incredible work you did in marketing. I always thought it was a waste that you stopped. And now, I have a project, a big project, and I want you to lead it. Claire was silent. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Claire, Nathan asked, are you still there? I am, she replied, her voice almost cracking. But why? Why are you offering me this? Because I see potential where Richard sees mediocrity. And because I believe you deserve a chance to prove to yourself and to the world what you're capable of. Claire closed her eyes. A chance, an opportunity, a door opening just when she needed it. When can we talk about this? She asked. Tomorrow morning, in my office, 9 o'clock. What do you think? Claire smiled. For the second time that night, she actually smiled. I'll be there. Claire couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, processing everything that had happened. Dinner, the humiliation, the decision to leave, and now, Nathan's call. A business proposal. Something she never imagined could happen. She glanced at the clock on the bedside table. 3 a.m. Richard hadn't come home yet. He was probably at a hotel or a friend's house, waiting for Claire to come crawling back and apologize. But that wasn't going to happen. Never again. Claire got out of bed and went to the window. The city was quiet, the streetlights glowing dimly in the darkness. She thought of everything she'd left behind when she married Richard. The promising career, the creative projects, the feeling of building something with her own hands. She'd been good at what she did. Very good. Her campaigns made people stop, pay attention, buy. She had talent, and she'd thrown it all away. But maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe Nathan's proposal was exactly what she needed. A second chance. A chance to prove, to herself and to the world, that she still had value. The hours passed slowly. Claire showered, chose a professional outfit, a gray blazer and black pants, and carefully dressed herself. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back was different, stronger, more determined, ready. At 8:30 a.m, Claire left home. She called an Uber and gave Nathan's office address. The drive took 20 minutes, and Claire spent the entire time breathing deeply, calming her nerves, and preparing her mind. She didn't know exactly what Nathan was going to propose, but she knew she needed to be ready for whatever came her way. Nathan's office was in a modern building downtown. Claire entered the lobby, gave her name at reception, and was directed to the 10th floor. The elevator ascended quickly, and when the doors opened, Claire found herself in a sleek hallway with glass walls and minimalist decor. A secretary greeted her with a polite smile. "Claire, Nathan is expecting you. Please follow me." Claire followed the secretary down a hallway to a conference room. Nathan was sitting at a large table, papers spread out in front of him and a laptop open. When he saw Claire, he stood and extended his hand. "Claire, thank you for coming," Nathan said, shaking her hand firmly. "Please have a seat." Claire sat down, placing her bag beside her chair. Nathan sat across the table from her and looked at her with a serious but gentle expression. "First of all, I want to apologize for what happened yesterday," Nathan began. "I should have said something. I should have stood up for you, and I didn't, and that was wrong of me." Claire nodded. "Thank you for saying that. But I didn't call you here just to apologize," Nathan continued. "I called you because I have a proposal, and I want you to listen carefully before you answer." Claire leaned forward. "I'm listening." Nathan opened a folder in front of him and pulled out some documents. "Claire, I know you worked in marketing before you married Richard. I did some research on you last night. I saw the campaigns you created, the projects you led, and I was impressed, very impressed." Claire felt her face heat up. She hadn't expected that. "I'm developing a new project," Nathan explained. "It's a product line focused on empowering women, from clothing to accessories, including courses and events. It's something big, something that can really make a difference. But for it to work, I need someone who understands the audience, someone who knows how to speak to real women, who understands what they need and want. And I believe that person is you." Claire was silent, processing his words. A project focused on empowering women, led by her. It felt surreal. "Nathan, I haven't worked in this in 10 years, Claire said, her voice hesitant. "I don't know if I have what it takes anymore." "Claire, talent doesn't disappear," Nathan replied. "It just lies dormant. And I believe you still have it inside you. In fact, I believe you have more than you did before. Because you have experience. You've been through things that many women go through. You know what it's like to feel invisible, undervalued, diminished, and that's exactly what will make you connect with the audience of this project." Claire felt her eyes sting. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. Nathan was right. She knew what it was all about. She had lived it, and perhaps, precisely because of that, she could do something meaningful. "What exactly do you want me to do?" Claire asked. I want you to lead the marketing strategy for the project, Nathan said. From branding to campaigns, events, everything. You'll have a team working with you, but the main vision will be yours. And Claire, I'm not offering this to you out of charity. I'm offering it to you because I believe you're the right person for it. Claire took a deep breath. This was real. Nathan was offering her a chance to start over, to prove to herself that she still had value, that she could still create, build, make a difference. How long do I have to think about this? Claire asked. Nathan smiled. How long do you need? Claire looked at him, and then, without much thought, she answered, I don't need time. I accept. Nathan reached across the table. Welcome to the team, Claire. Claire squeezed his hand, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. This was the beginning of something new, something hers. And for the first time in years, Claire felt like she had a purpose, a future, a chance. The first few days were the hardest. Claire left that meeting with Nathan full of energy, motivation, and hope. But when she got home and sat down in front of her computer, reality hit her. She hadn't done that in 10 years, 10 years away from the industry. 10 years without creating campaigns, without leading teams, without making important decisions. And now, she was about to lead an entire project, alone. Doubts began to creep in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she'd lost her touch? What if Nathan had made a mistake in trusting her? Claire stared at the blank computer screen and felt the weight of responsibility fall onto her shoulders. But she took a deep breath. She had accepted this challenge. And she wasn't going to give up. Not now. Nathan had given her 3 weeks to present the initial branding proposal, 3 weeks to develop the project's visual identity, tone of voice, and communication strategy. 3 weeks that seemed simultaneously too much and not enough time. Claire started with the basics. She researched. She spent hours reading about the female empowerment market, what was working and what wasn't. She analyzed competitors, studied trends, and dove deep into the data. And little by little, ideas began to emerge. She created a detailed vision document for the project. The target audience was women between 30 and 50, women who had experienced life changes, faced challenges, and were looking to start over. Women like her. The core message was clear. You are stronger than you think. And the project name? Claire thought for days, testing dozens of options, until she finally found the perfect name, Rise. Simple, direct, powerful. But while Claire was immersed in work, her personal life was in chaos. Richard had finally returned home 3 days after dinner. He walked in, tossed his keys on the table, and looked at Claire as if nothing had happened. Claire, we need to talk, he said, his voice tired. Claire was sitting on the couch, her laptop on her lap, working. She looked at him and saw a man who looked different, smaller, less important. About what? She asked, turning her attention back to the screen. About what happened at dinner, Richard said, stepping closer. You overreacted. You made a scene in front of my partners. That was embarrassing. Claire closed her laptop slowly and looked at him. Did I overreact? You humiliated me in front of strangers, Richard. You said our marriage was a joke. And did I overreact? Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. I drank too much. I didn't mean those things. You know how I get when I drink. No, Claire said, getting up from the couch. You meant to. And you know what? I agree with you. This marriage is a joke, and I'm done with it. Officially. Richard frowned. As Claire, you can't just end a marriage like that, out of the blue. You're being dramatic. I'm not being dramatic, Claire replied, her voice firm. I'm being realistic. I spent 10 years trying to be enough for you, and I never was. And you know what? I don't want to be anymore. I want to be enough for myself. Richard took a step back, surprised. He hadn't expected that response. He expected Claire to beg, to cry, to beg him to stay. But she did none of those things. Are you serious? He asked. Absolutely, Claire replied. And I'm going to ask you one thing. Leave the house, go to a hotel, go wherever you want, but leave. I need space." Richard stood there for a moment, processing. And then, without another word, he grabbed his keys and left. The door slammed behind him, and Claire was left alone. But this time, the loneliness didn't hurt. It brought relief. The next few days were a roller coaster. Claire worked from morning to night, creating, drawing, and thinking. She connected with Nathan almost every day, sending updates, asking for feedback, and adjusting the strategy. And Nathan was impressed. He said her work exceeded all his expectations. But not everything was easy. There were times when Claire would wake up in the middle of the night, in a cold sweat, thinking she'd made a mistake, that she should have stayed quiet in the restaurant, that she should have given Richard another chance, that she couldn't do it. But then she looked at the work she was creating. She looked at the vision she was building, and she remembered why she had accepted that proposal. It wasn't just about the project. It was about her, about proving to herself that she still had value, that she could still be someone. A week before the final performance, Nathan called Claire. Claire, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice serious. Claire felt her stomach tighten. "What is it?" "Richard found out about the project," Nathan said. "He called me today. He's furious. He said I'm trying to sabotage him using you." Claire closed her eyes. Of course Richard would find out. Of course he would make this about him. "And what did you answer?" Claire asked. "I told the truth," Nathan replied. "That you're talented, that you deserve this opportunity, and that it has nothing to do with him. But Claire, you need to be prepared. Richard won't let this go." Claire took a deep breath. "I'm prepared. He can do whatever he wants. This is mine, and no one will take it away from me." Nathan was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You've changed, Claire, and it's a good change." Claire smiled. He was right. She had changed. And for the first time in her life, she was becoming the person she was always meant to be. The presentation was a success. Claire entered the meeting room with Nathan and 3 other executives from his company, and for 40 minutes, she presented the complete vision of the RISE project, the branding, the colors, the tone of voice, the communication strategy, everything. And when she finished, the silence in the room was followed by applause, genuine applause. "Claire, this is amazing," one of the executives said, flipping through the printed presentation. "You've captured exactly what we're looking for. This will connect with the audience in a powerful way." Nathan looked at Claire with a proud smile. "I told you you were the one." Claire felt a surge of emotion. She had done it. After 10 years away, she had proven she could still do it. And more than that, she had done it better than she had imagined. Over the next few weeks, the project came to life. Nathan approved the full budget, and Claire was introduced to the team that would work with her. 5 people, 3 designers, a data analyst, and a social media manager, all young, talented, and full of energy. And they all looked to Claire expectantly, awaiting her leadership. At first, Claire felt the weight of that responsibility. She hadn't led a team in years. She hadn't made important decisions in years. But slowly, something inside her awakened. A confidence she didn't know she had. An ability to connect ideas, to see the big picture, to guide people in the right direction. The first team meeting was eye-opening. Claire sat in front of everyone and began to talk about the project's vision. She explained the reasons behind each choice, the meaning behind each branding element, and the importance of speaking authentically to the audience. And as she spoke, she saw people's eyes light up. They were listening. They were engaged. They believed her. "This project isn't just about selling products," Claire said, looking at each person in the room. "It's about creating a community. It's about making women feel seen, valued, and capable. And for that to work, every detail matters. Every word, every image, every message." The team nodded. And from that moment on, everyone worked together like a well-oiled machine. Claire discovered she had a talent for motivating people. for making everyone feel part of something bigger, for transforming work into purpose. The first campaigns were launched: digital ads, social media posts, partnerships with influencers, and the response was immediate. Women began interacting, commenting, and sharing. Messages arrived every day. Women shared their stories, saying they identified with Rise's message, that they were inspired to start over, to pursue their dreams. Claire read each message with tears in her eyes. This wasn't just a project, it was a movement, and she was at the center of it. But as the project grew, Claire also discovered things about herself, things she hadn't known existed. She discovered she had negotiating skills. When suppliers tried to charge high prices, she negotiated until she got fair prices. She discovered she had the courage to make difficult decisions. When a campaign wasn't working, she wasn't afraid to completely change the strategy. She discovered she had vision. She could see opportunities where others saw problems. Nathan noticed. He called Claire for a private meeting 3 months after the project launched. "Claire, I need to tell you something," he said, sitting across from her. "This project is growing much faster than I expected. Sales are exceeding all projections. Social media engagement is exploding. And it's all because of you." Claire smiled, but tried to be modest. "It's because of the whole team." "No," Nathan interrupted. "It's because of you. The team is good, but you're the leader, you're the vision. And I want to make you a proposal." Claire leaned forward. "What kind of proposal?" "I want you to become a partner in the project," Nathan said. "I want you to have a share in the profits, because this isn't just mine, it's yours too. You built this, and you deserve to be rewarded for it." Claire was speechless. Partner, profit sharing. This meant she wasn't just working for someone else. She was building something that was hers, something with real value, something that could completely change her future. "Nathan, I don't know what to say," Claire murmured. "Say yes," Nathan replied, extending his hand. Claire looked at his hand, and then, without hesitation, she shook it. Yes. That night, Claire returned home with a contract in her purse, a contract that made her a partner in a rapidly growing business, a business she had helped create, a business that was hers. She sat on the couch and looked around the house, the same house where she had felt invisible for years. But now, everything seemed different, because she was different. She was no longer the woman who accepted being diminished. She was the woman who was building an empire. And as Claire stared at the contract in her hand, she thought of Richard. She thought of his words at that dinner: mediocrity, no ambition, no vision. And she smiled, because he was wrong, dead wrong. And soon, the whole world would know it. 6 months after that night at the restaurant, Claire was in a completely different place. The Rise project had become one of the most successful launches of the year. Sales had surpassed $1 million in the first quarter. Her social media following had grown to over 200,000, and Claire was being invited to give interviews, participate in podcasts, and speak at events. She had become a force to be reckoned with. But with success came attention. And some of that attention came from someone Claire would rather forget: Richard. He started with messages, short, seemingly innocent messages. "Hi, Claire, I saw an article about the Rise project. Congratulations." Then, "Can we talk? I miss you." And finally, "I made a mistake. Let me explain." Claire ignored them all. She deleted the messages without replying. She blocked his number. But Richard didn't give up. He showed up at her office. Claire was leaving a meeting when she saw him standing in the reception area. He was wearing an expensive suit, his hair neatly styled, and he had the same charming smile she knew so well. But now, that smile had no effect on her. "Claire," Richard said, stepping closer, "you look beautiful. Success suits you." Claire stopped and looked at him. She didn't smile. "What do you want, Richard?" "I just wanted to talk," he said, putting his hands in his pockets. 5 minutes, please." Claire looked around. A few people in the office were watching. She didn't want to make a scene. 5 minutes, right here." Richard nodded and took a deep breath. Claire, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. And I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. Claire crossed her arms. You're sorry? Yes, Richard continued. I was wrong, completely wrong. I didn't value you. I didn't see what you were capable of. And now, seeing everything you've built, I realize what a fool I was. Claire was silent, waiting for him to continue. I want a second chance, Richard said, taking a step forward. I want us to try again. I've changed, Claire. I've learned, and I know that together, we can be amazing. Claire looked at him, really looked, and she saw exactly what he was doing. He didn't want her. He wanted her success. He wanted to be associated with what she had built. He wanted to use her. Richard, you haven't changed, Claire said, her voice calm but firm. You just realized I have value now, and you want a piece of that. It's not that, Richard protested. I still love you. You never loved me, Claire replied. You loved the idea of having someone who didn't question you, someone who stayed in the background, someone who made you seem bigger, but I'm not that person anymore. And I never will be again. Richard was speechless. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. And another thing, Claire continued. I don't need you. I don't need your approval. I don't need anything you have to offer, because everything I've built, I built alone, without you, in spite of you. Richard looked down. Claire, please. The 5 minutes are up, Claire said, grabbing her purse. Don't come back here. Don't look for me again. We're done, forever. She turned and walked toward the elevator. Richard stood there, alone, watching her leave. And this time, Claire felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no doubt. She felt peace. As she stepped into the elevator and the doors closed, Claire took a deep breath. She had done it. She had stood up to Richard and made it clear that she no longer needed him. And that, somehow, was liberating. But what Claire didn't know was that Richard wouldn't take the rejection lightly. In the following days, he began spreading rumors. He told his acquaintances that Claire had stolen his ideas, that the Rise project only existed because of his connections, that she was using his name to gain traction. Nathan heard the rumors and called Claire immediately. Claire, you need to know that Richard is trying to tarnish your reputation. Claire sighed. I figured he'd do something like that. What do you want to do? Nathan asked. Nothing, Claire replied. Let him speak. The people who matter know the truth, and the results speak for themselves. I'm not going to waste time responding to someone who has no power over me. Nathan was silent for a moment. You're right. You are stronger than he is, and he knows it. Claire hung up the phone and got back to work. She had a campaign to finalize, an interview to record, a future to build. Richard could do whatever he wanted. She wasn't going to let him distract her. She'd come too far to look back now. And while Claire worked, preparing the next big move for the Rise project, something was happening behind the scenes. Something that would change everything, because her success was about to reach a level she couldn't even imagine. And Richard? Richard would have to watch from afar, watching the woman he'd underestimated become unstoppable. How many times have you let someone put you down? How many times have you believed them when they told you you weren't capable? Sometimes the greatest power we have is proving them wrong, not to them, but to ourselves. Tell us in the comments, have you ever experienced something similar? 3 months after Richard's visit to the office, Claire received an email that changed everything. It was from one of the largest retail chains in the United States. They had seen the Rise project, followed its growth on social media, analyzed the sales figures, and they wanted to make a proposal, a big one. Claire read the email 3 times before she could believe what she was seeing. They wanted to put Rise products in all their stores, over 1,000 stores across the country, and they were willing to pay $5 million up front for the exclusivity agreement. $5 million. Claire sat in her chair, her hands shaking. This was real. This was happening. She picked up the phone and called Nathan immediately. Nathan, "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "What? What happened?" Nathan asked, worried. "Westfield Retail has reached out. They want to do a deal. 5 million upfront, 1,000 points of sale." Silence on the other end. And then Nathan shouted, "Claire, are you serious? This is amazing. This is huge." Claire laughed, feeling tears stream down her face. "I know. I can't believe it. We need to meet now, right now. We need to review the contract, understand the terms, make sure this is good for us. Can you come to the office?" "I'm leaving now," Claire said, grabbing her bag. The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind, endless meetings with lawyers, negotiations over terms, and contract adjustments. Westfield Retail wanted to secure exclusivity for 3 years. In exchange, they offered not only the 5 million upfront, but also a generous percentage of sales. If everything went as planned, Claire and Nathan could earn over 20 million in the coming years. 20 million. Claire could barely process it. She, who 6 months ago was sitting in a restaurant being humiliated by her husband, was now about to close one of the biggest deals in the industry. She, who had been called mediocre, unambitious, invisible, was building an empire. The day of the contract signing arrived. Claire chose a white suit, elegant and powerful. She looked in the mirror before leaving the house and saw a woman she barely recognized. A strong, confident, determined woman. A woman who had fought for this, who had faced doubts, fears, criticism, and who had won. The signing took place at Westfield Retail's offices, in an imposing building in downtown New York. Claire entered the meeting room with Nathan at her side. Across the table were Westfield executives, all in dark suits and professional smiles. "Claire, Nathan, it's a pleasure to meet you both in person," the Westfield CEO said, shaking each of their hands. "We're very excited about this partnership. The work you've done with Rise is impressive. It's exactly the kind of project we want to associate with our brand." Claire smiled. "Thank you. We're equally excited." The contracts were placed on the table. Claire picked up the pen and looked at Nathan. He nodded, encouraging her. And then she signed. A simple, quick signature, but it meant everything. When Claire raised her head, the executives applauded. Champagne was poured, toasts were made, and Claire, in the midst of it all, felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She had done it. Against all odds, she had done it. After the meeting, Claire and Nathan left the building and walked through the streets of New York. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Claire stopped on a street corner and looked out at the horizon. "Are you okay?" Nathan asked, noticing her silence. Claire nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I'm just processing everything. 6 months ago, I had nothing. I was nobody. And now, I just closed a $5 million deal." Nathan put his hand on her shoulder. "Claire, you've always been someone. You just needed an opportunity to show it. And you took it. You worked hard. You believed in yourself. You didn't give up. And look where you are now." Claire smiled. "Thank you, Nathan, for everything. For believing in me when no one else did. For giving me this chance." "I gave you nothing," Nathan replied. "You earned it all on your own." That night, Claire returned home and sat on the couch. She picked up her phone and checked her notifications. There were dozens of congratulatory messages. News of the deal had leaked, and people were celebrating. Influencers, clients, and team members all sent messages of support and admiration. And then, amidst all those messages, Claire saw one from Richard. She hesitated for a moment, but decided to open it. "Claire, I saw the news. Congratulations. You proved me wrong, completely wrong. And I want you to know that I'm proud of you. Even though we're not together anymore, I recognize what you've accomplished. You're incredible." Claire read the message once. And then, without responding, she deleted it. Because Richard's approval meant nothing to her. She hadn't done it to prove anything to him. She'd done it to prove herself. And she had. But while Claire celebrated silently, something was happening across town. Richard was in his apartment, alone, staring at his phone. He'd seen the news of Claire's deal, and he'd seen something else, an article in a business magazine. The headline read, "Claire, the woman who turned rejection into $1 million empire." The article told her story, how she'd been underestimated, how she'd decided to start over, how she'd built Rise from scratch, and in the middle of the article, there was a quote from her. "There was a time when I believed I was worthless, that I wasn't enough, but I learned that a person's worth isn't defined by someone else's opinion. It's defined by what we do with the opportunities we have, and I decided to seize mine." Richard closed the article and threw his phone on the couch. He ran his hand over his face, feeling the weight of regret. He had had Claire. He had had a talented, intelligent, capable woman, and he had thrown it all away. He had humiliated her, diminished her, destroyed her, and now she was shining, without him, despite him. And Richard was alone. His business had begun to decline. 2 of his biggest clients had canceled contracts. His partners were questioning his decisions, and his once solid reputation was beginning to crack, because people had heard the rumors. They knew how he'd treated Claire, and they didn't like it. As Claire climbed, Richard descended, and for the first time in his life, he understood. He understood that he had lost the best thing that had ever happened to him, and that he would never get it back. Claire, on the other hand, was just getting started. The Westfield deal was just the first step. She had bigger plans, international expansion, new products, new projects, and she knew she could do it because she had proven herself capable, not to Richard, not to Nathan, but to herself, and that was the most important victory of all. The following months were transformative for Claire. The deal with Westfield Retail was just the beginning. Doors began opening from all directions, invitations to speak at business conferences, interviews on famous podcasts, articles in prestigious magazines. Claire was everywhere, and every time she spoke, people listened. The first talk took place in Chicago at a women's entrepreneurship conference. Claire took the stage in front of 2,000 women. She looked at the audience, took a deep breath, and began speaking. She told her story. The humiliation at the restaurant, the decision to leave, Nathan's proposal, the building of Rise, and the victory. When she finished, the audience rose to their feet. Deafening applause filled the auditorium. Women wept. Others shouted words of encouragement. And Claire, there on stage, felt the impact of what she had created. It wasn't just about her. It was about all the women who felt invisible, who felt diminished, who needed inspiration to start over. After the talk, dozens of women approached Claire. They wanted to thank her. They wanted to share their stories. They wanted to tell her that Claire had changed their lives. "You gave me the courage to leave my abusive marriage," a woman said, holding Claire's hands. "I thought I couldn't survive on my own, but you showed me it's possible." "I started my own business after hearing your story," another woman said, her eyes shining. "I was afraid, but you inspired me." Claire hugged each of them, feeling the responsibility of it all. She wasn't just a businesswoman, she was a symbol, a role model, and she took it seriously. The interviews continued. Claire appeared on one of the country's most popular business podcasts. The host asked questions about Rise's strategy, the challenges she faced, and the project's future. And Claire answered clearly, confidently, and wisely. She was no longer the insecure woman who had left that restaurant. She was a leader, a visionary, someone who had transformed pain into purpose. "Claire, what would you say to women who are in similar situations to you?" the host asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Claire thought for a moment before answering. "I'd say your worth doesn't depend on anyone's opinion. Not your husband's, not your boss's, not society's. You have power. You have talent. You have ability. But sometimes you just need the courage to take the first step. And that first step can change everything. It may seem impossible at first, but every day it gets easier. Every decision you make for yourself makes you stronger." The interview went viral. Millions of people watched it, and Claire received messages from all over the country, from women thanking her, from companies seeking partnerships, from investors wanting to support new projects. She was becoming more than a successful businesswoman. She was becoming a movement. But while Claire shone, Richard sank. His troubles began small. A major client canceled, citing concerns about the company's values. Then another canceled, and another. People began to question his integrity. Rumors about how he had treated Claire spread like wildfire through business circles. And in the business world, reputation is everything. Nathan told Claire what was happening. Richard is in crisis. He's lost 3 of his biggest clients in the last few weeks, and the partners are considering ousting him. They say he's damaging the company's image. Claire was silent for a moment. Part of her felt pity, but most of her felt justice. A natural justice, not caused by her, but by his own actions. "I'm not going to do anything to him," Claire said calmly. "He did this on his own. He created his own destruction. People just saw who he really is." Nathan nodded. "Exactly. People saw who he really is, and they didn't like it. No one wants to do business with someone who treats people like that." Richard tried to recover. He held desperate meetings with former and potential clients. He offered outrageous discounts that jeopardized his profitability. He begged for second chances, promising changes everyone knew he wouldn't make. But nothing worked. Because the problem wasn't just business. It was character. And character can't be fixed with discounts or empty words. He tried contacting Claire again. Texts, calls, emails, all ignored. She had blocked all his communication channels. He even showed up at an event where Claire was speaking in Manhattan. He stood in the back of the auditorium, hidden in the shadows, watching her speak to hundreds of people, watching her receive a standing ovation, watching her shine in a way he never imagined possible. And when the event ended, he tried to approach her, but security stopped him. Claire had given him clear instructions. Richard was not welcome at any of her events. He no longer had a place in her life. He stood there, standing at the auditorium entrance, watching Claire chat with prominent business people, prestigious investors, people who genuinely admired her. And he realized he had lost everything. Not just Claire, but the future they could have had together, the success they could have shared, all destroyed by his arrogance, his blindness, his cruelty. Claire, on the other hand, was planning her next step, an international product line to launch in Europe, partnerships with prestigious brands in London and Paris, a book telling her story, scheduled for release next year, and a documentary about the Rise project that a streaming producer had proposed. She was building a legacy, something that would last, something that would inspire generations of women to never accept being diminished. And as she worked, surrounded by her team, supported by Nathan, admired by thousands of women across the country, Claire looked out her office window. The view showed the entire city, vibrant and full of possibilities. She thought about where she'd been just a few months ago, sitting in that restaurant, listening to Richard tell her she was worthless, that she was mediocre, and she smiled, because he was wrong, so completely wrong, and the whole world knew it now. But most importantly, Claire knew. She knew her worth. She knew her power. And no one, ever again, was going to take that away from her. The charity gala took place at one of New York's most luxurious hotels. It was an evening dedicated to celebrating successful female entrepreneurs, and Claire had been invited as one of the keynote speakers. She arrived wearing a long, elegant, and powerful black gown. Her hair was tied back in a sophisticated bun, and she wore diamond earrings that sparkled under the room's lights. When Claire entered the room, all heads turned. People wanted to meet her, shake her hand, take pictures with her. Claire had become someone important, someone people admired, and she accepted it with humility and gratitude. Nathan stood beside her, proud. "You're killing it, Claire. Look how people look at you. You're an inspiration to so many." Claire smiled. "I still can't believe all this is happening." "Believe me, Nathan said. "You deserve every second of this." The evening continued with dinner, speeches, and performances. Claire was called to the stage to talk about her journey. She walked confidently to the microphone, looked out at the audience of over 500 people, and began. "A year ago, I was in a very different place," Claire began, her voice steady and clear. "I was sitting in a restaurant, listening to someone I loved tell me I was worthless, that I was mediocre, that I had no ambition, and in that moment, I had two choices. I could believe it, or I could prove them wrong." The audience was silent, each person hanging on her every word. "I chose to prove him wrong," Claire continued. "Not to him, but to myself, because I needed to believe in myself. And when I did, when I took that first step, everything changed. I discovered I had talents I never knew existed. I discovered I was capable of things I never imagined. And I built something that changed my life." The applause began. But Claire raised her hand, asking them to keep listening. "But I didn't do this alone," she said. "I had help. I had someone who believed in me when no one else did. And I had you, all the women who bought Rise products, who shared your stories, who gave me the strength to keep going. You are a part of this, and I thank each and every one of you." The audience rose to their feet. The applause was deafening. Claire walked off the stage with tears in her eyes, embraced by dozens of women who wanted to thank her. And it was in the midst of this celebration that Claire saw him. Richard. He stood at the back of the room, wearing a dark suit, his eyes fixed on her. He looked different, thinner, more tired, less confident. Claire paused for a moment. She hadn't expected to see him there, but she didn't look away. She looked directly at him and then continued talking to the people around her. Half an hour later, when the crowd around Claire had thinned, Richard approached. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, his posture hesitant. "Claire," he said, his voice low, "can you give me a minute?" Claire looked at him. She could have said no. She could have turned her back and walked away. But something in her decided to listen. Not because she cared about him, but because she wanted to close that chapter once and for all. "1 minute," Claire said. Richard took a deep breath. "I know you don't want to talk to me. I know I don't even deserve to be here. But I needed to tell you something. I was wrong, completely wrong." Claire crossed her arms, waiting for him to continue. "I underestimated you," Richard said, his voice breaking. "I belittled you. I treated you like you were worthless. And I was so wrong, Claire. So wrong. You are amazing. You always have been. And I was too stupid to see it." Claire was silent. She felt no satisfaction. She felt no anger. She only felt indifference. "I lost everything," Richard continued. "The clients, the partners, the reputation, everything. And I deserve it. I know I deserve it. But what I lost most was you. And that's what hurts the most." Claire stared at him for a long moment. And then she spoke. "Richard, I don't need you to recognize my worth. I already know my worth. And you don't define that. Never have been." Richard looked down. "You put me through a lot," Claire continued. "You made me feel small, invisible, unimportant. But you know what you couldn't do? You couldn't destroy me, because I'm stronger than you ever imagined. And I always have been." Richard nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know. I see that now." "And another thing," Claire said, stepping forward. "I thank you, because if you hadn't humiliated me in that restaurant, I never would have found the strength to leave. I never would have discovered who I really am. So thank you, Richard, for setting me free." Richard froze. He hadn't expected that. Claire turned and began walking toward Nathan, who was waiting for her on the other side of the room. But before she completely left, she looked back one last time. "Mind your own business, Richard," she said. "I'm already minding mine." And with that, Claire left. She didn't look back again. She didn't need to, because that chapter was closed. Richard no longer had power over her. He no longer had a place in her life. He was just a distant memory of who she used to be. And as Claire walked through the room, surrounded by people who admired her, she felt something profound. She felt peace. Peace with herself, peace with the past, and an immense excitement for the future that was yet to come. 2 years after that night at the restaurant, Claire was at the top. Rise had expanded to 10 countries. Revenue had surpassed $50 million. And Claire had become one of the most influential entrepreneurs in the country. But the most important thing wasn't the numbers. It was the woman she had become. A woman who knew her worth, who wouldn't accept being diminished, who transformed pain into purpose. Claire's story teaches us something powerful. No one can define who you are. No one can limit what you can achieve. Only you have that power. And when you decide to believe in yourself, when you decide to take the first step, everything changes. So I ask you, what first step will you take today? Tell us in the comments, and if this story inspired you, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more amazing stories like this.